Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday Dwayne Johnson decided to flex his social media muscle not to promote a movie but for revenge. Yes, in a move very uncharacteristic for the overwhelmingly positive public personality, he took to his social media to post a rant about how while he loves his female co-stars on Fast 8, his male co-stars are a different story. And this post was so out of character and so juicy that everyone picked it up. Every outlet, even beyond industry outlets, entertainment outlets, but I even saw it on the front page of CNN. Sure, it was a little below the digital fold, but it was there. And I'm sure Vin Diesel was none too happy about it, as one of the biggest selling points about Fast and Furious franchise, on screen and off, is that it's all about family. But there's a family fight brewing. Now, everybody decided, of course, to try and figure out who Dwayne Johnson was talking about. And he said that, when you watch the movie, sometimes I'm not acting about how angry I am. And I like that Dwayne Johnson said, the producer in me feels that's the silver lining. And I was like, Dwayne, you haven't proven yourself as a producer just quite yet. But I like that you're shooting for the stars. But anyway, so everybody, of course, wants to know who it is. And I think that this is going to cast a shadow over the movie itself, because when people now watch Fast 8, since Dwayne Johnson has said, I have scenes with these individuals, and sometimes I'm not acting, I'm really that angry, everyone's going to be watching Fast 8 in the back of their mind to some degree thinking, is this that scene where he's actually genuinely upset with the person opposite him on screen? But anyway, everybody's reporting that it's Scott Eastwood that he's angry with, because he used the term candy asses, and that's something that was pulled directly, or was at least, the argument is that it was a wink at the Esquire interview that Scott Eastwood, the infamous Esquire interview, by the way, that Scott Eastwood just gave with his father, Clint Eastwood, which was infamous for other reasons, largely because not only did it, did both of them come out supporting Trump, a very controversial position, particularly for anyone in Hollywood, but they used some choice language that was slightly misogynistic. But anyway, it certainly painted a picture of someone that maybe Dwayne Johnson would not get along with. Although I think Scott Eastwood has a heck of a lot of nerve picking fights with people, considering how little screen time he actually got in Suicide Squad. But anyway, then there's the question of, he says, Dwayne Johnson says co-stars. Is there anyone else besides Scott Eastwood that he's angry with? I think that there's two ways to look at it. One is that he just did it to cover his track, so he didn't have to directly get in trouble with Scott Eastwood. Although I don't see, if he did this, it must have gotten to a point where he doesn't really care, right? He genuinely is upset with other people that he's working with. But there's really no other new talent coming to the table. The only thing that I can think of that might cause a problem between Dwayne Johnson and his repeat male co-stars is that Dwayne Johnson's star is just so much bigger than the last time they made a movie, right? It was on the rise when they made Furious 7, but it was nothing like it is now. Dwayne Johnson is probably one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest star in Fast 8. Well, Charlize Theron is a bigger star. Although I don't know necessarily. Dwayne Johnson, his box office after San Andreas is very impressive. His social media following dwarfs anyone else. Vin Diesel's probably a close second, but he's no Dwayne Johnson. So perhaps, maybe Dwayne Johnson's a little bit to blame. Maybe, he's like still in ballers mode on set. But still, they should be able to work these things out behind the scenes and not have it get so public. So either things got so bad that Dwayne Johnson felt he had no other recourse, or Dwayne Johnson is doing a power move and saying, I have this level of social media, why should I have to put up with this? But I think that it's crossing a line to use your social media for evil, to hurt the reputation of a movie. And I think that going forward, Dwayne Johnson shouldn't be too surprised if he gets contracts put in front of him saying, we have to approve any social media posts that you make about this project, just to protect its image. And as a matter of fact, now that I think about it, if I were producing a film that Dwayne Johnson was going to star in, I'd probably insist on that. Maybe if he pushed on it, I wasn't, if he was a bigger star than I could probably get, maybe I'd acquiesce eventually. But if I were a big studio, I'd be like, I'm sorry, but I just can't risk you tarnishing the image of the movie before it even comes out. So we'll see what happens. I think Dwayne Johnson should also be a little bit careful because Central Intelligence, while it rallied at the box office, it's still only at 206 worldwide, which is nothing compared to this Fast and Furious and G.I. Joe and San Andreas box office. So he's not consistently knocking them out of the park. So that's something he should also consider. Oh, it's so gossipy. Oh, crazy. And at the end of the day, I don't know. Again, if Dwayne Johnson was pushed that far, then I guess I can understand where he was going. But he should have maybe just asked for more money or refused to promote it unless they fixed the situation on set. Said, if people keep being this mean to me, I'm not promoting your movie. And we'll see how well it does. It probably would do amazing. But anyway, let's get on to the second story of the day. And this is about Ghostbusters 2. This is something the Hollywood Reporter covered this morning. I got a lot of you sending me this article. And this is, I think, something I really want to highlight, not only because Ghostbusters is something that we're all very interested in, that developing story, but also because I want to point out that you shouldn't believe sequel announcements, particularly when they're made around the release of the current installment. Do you remember Monday morning after Ghostbusters came out and everyone was saying, oh, they're making Ghostbusters 2? Sony promised. Don't believe sequel announcements made anywhere in the same vicinity of the release of the current installment. It's only done to promote the current installment or to save face if the current installment doesn't do particularly well at the box office. That's rarely the latter, but that's the situation that Sony found themselves in with the Ghostbusters opening weekend. And they really wanted to put a happy face on it so that maybe more people would go and see it. But they didn't. So the Hollywood Reporter has said that, at this point, they pointed out that Ghostbusters is only at about 180 million worldwide, and it's going to struggle to get to 225, if that. It has a few markets to go, most notably like Japan, but it's not going to get to the 300 it would need to break even, and certainly not to the 500 that would make Sony feel comfortable about moving forward with the sequel, as Paul Feig himself said. So the big headline is that they're not going to give up on the Ghostbusters franchise, but they're going animated. They want to do an animated movie for 2019, and they want to do an animated series called Ghostbusters Ecto-Force. That's a pretty cool name, for early 2018. And you better believe there will be guys on those teams. Probably not all guys, but at least two, because I just think that female Ghostbusters, at least for now, did not work out. And I think that somewhat falls on Paul Feig and the way he presented female Ghostbusters. I think Ghostbusters could have worked, although, as we've discussed, I think from the get-go, it was kind of doomed because they decided to make it an entirely female team. But anyway, they said, Sony has said, oh, don't worry about us. We're still making money off of Ghostbusters. Even though we're probably going to lose a little bit of money on the theatrical release, people are going to stream this movie. It'll play on airplanes. Also, the streaming of the original film has been up significantly because of Ghostbusters is on everyone's mind. They've also made a deal with Madame Tussauds for an exhibit. Although I have to say, again, as I mentioned before, I was walking past Madame Tussauds on 42nd Street here in New York City about a week or so ago, and they had a Leslie Jones wax figure out front, and while people were looking at it, no one wanted their picture with it. So I'd be interested to see how long that Madame Tussauds exhibit lasts. And then they also have done a Dubai theme park ride, but if the Dubai theme park ride is not Ghostbusters generic, but is Ghostbusters Reboot specific, I wonder how long that will do, well. Particularly because, I don't know, Dubai I think is pretty modern, but I don't think that audience is super, like women's rights, right? I mean, like, no offense or anything, but it's just not like I think at the forefront of thinking of people probably in Dubai. So anyway, I'd be very curious to see how Ghostbusters does continue as a brand. Ivan Reitman is apparently still in charge of it. Although they're trying to say, don't worry, because it was Amy Pascal, who's conveniently no longer at the company, who greenlit Paul Feig's all-female version. But, I have to say, Ivan Reitman didn't say no. He didn't refuse to work on it if he couldn't say no, like if he couldn't stop it. And also, I don't think Ivan Reitman's been doing a lot of great stuff over the past couple of decades, right? I mean, he did a great job with the first Ghostbusters, but he's not someone who consistently delivers. So I'm not quite sure. I would probably bring in new talent on this, and I would do another movie in a couple of years. I don't know if an animated movie is the right way to go. It feels to me deep down like a TV series for sure, but it feels to me like an animated movie, feels a little bit like another mistake in the same vein as the all-female team. Maybe a Netflix series, do something that's episodic, give you a little more time to explore the characters and put a little bit of money in it so you can have cool VFX with the ghosts. I'm not quite sure what the next move would be, but I don't know. until I see the first visuals for the concept art for the animated movie, I just don't know. It seems to me like it would just be like Hotel Transylvania, right? Although that does make a lot of money for Sony, so I can see why they would be interested in perhaps turning that Ghostbusters into that. All right, so anyway, that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is also Sony-based. They have gotten over at TriStar. Sony has a couple of distributors, just like any, there are a number of companies who have a couple of different distributors. But Sony has Columbia Pictures and TriStar Pictures, just like Warner Brothers has like Warner Brothers proper and then like New Line, for instance. Okay? So anyway, over at TriStar, they're doing Chronicles of Narnia. That's landed there, and they're going to reboot it, starting with the Silver Chair book, which takes place with a different set of kids, and an older Prince Caspian, a much older Prince Caspian. I don't know. I think that it might be too late for the Chronicles of Narnia franchise. I think the last two, well, the second one was just absolutely horrible. As you might recall, I was like, those kids got a bunch of mythical creatures killed in battle. They're horrible leaders. It was really shocking to watch. You were like, wow, those kids are responsible for hundreds of deaths. And that was a weird thing to see in a family movie. And then I didn't even see the third film, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but really not many people did. And I just think that's still a little too fresh in people's minds for this really to, they'd have to do some amazing casting and talent attached. But so far, the only talent attached is behind the camera as the producer, and that's Mark Gordon. Now, Mark Gordon has a pretty good resume, actually. For instance, he did the recent Steve Jobs movie, the upcoming War Dogs, which looks very good. But here's where it gets interesting. He's also the producer on Disney's Nutcracker and the Four Realms, which seems kind of similar to the Chronicles of Narnia, right? And then the screenwriter on this is going to be David McGee, who wrote Life of Pi and Finding Neverland, but also Mary Poppins Returns. That is a lot of Disney talent working on a Sony picture. So it would seem to me that Sony is trying to backdoor their way into the live-action fairy tale market, cherry-picking some Disney talent that they can get their hands on to try and revive something that was also originally a Disney property, interestingly enough. But I still feel that, I just don't really see people rallying to another Chronicles of Narnia movie. I don't know if Tilda Swinton would be there, but how could she if it's an actual reboot? And, there's a very strong religious aspect to these stories, which I think, to some degree, would favor the hardcore Chronicles of Narnia fans, but might be off-putting to the casual fan. I'm just not quite sure. I love the first Chronicles of Narnia, but again, they're so far from that, it would be a tall order. I would almost just say they should try and get another property. So we'll see. I think the Nutcracker and the Four Realms is going to be a huge hit, but I don't really know about Chronicles of Narnia. So I'm curious to how you guys feel. Does anyone here have any interest in a Chronicles of Narnia movie? Although we all reserve the right to change our minds when we start to see how it comes together. All right, so anyway, those are the three stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Iconic Conic, and we've talked about, well, let me tell you what the question is, and then I'll explain why I decided to answer it. So Iconic Conic says, question, hey Grace, longtime Irish fan, could you please explain the box office and how a movie earns money and distributes it? Thank you, and keep up the great coverage. Now, we've talked about box office returns before, but I like the fact that this came from an Irish BTT viewer. Hello in Ireland there. And I think it gives us a good opportunity to talk about foreign box office, because, a lot of times we discuss the fact that the studio only walks home with about 50% of what the worldwide box office is. And many of you said, oh, movies are so front-loaded these days. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Well, this question reminded me of something, an aspect to the box office, the worldwide box office, that helps to explain why a studio only gets that 50%. So here in the United States, just as a refresher, they split the box office take between the theater and the studio. Now, in the beginning weeks of a movie's release, the split favors the studio, right? And then the theater is supposed to get most of their money off of the concession stand purchases. And AMC, for instance, reported that less people are buying food, which is one of the reasons their earnings are so horribly down. But anyway, the longer a movie is in the theater, the more the percentage, the way they split the box office starts to go into the theater's favor, because it incentivizes them to keep the movie in the theater, right? The longer it plays there, the more of that money that is going to the theater. So that's one of the ways that you have the 50% split at the end of the day between what goes out into the other companies and what goes to the studios. Now, the worldwide box office makes things a little bit more complicated because there's another person eating some of that box office pie, and that is the foreign distributor. So very rarely will a studio distribute its own movie overseas. They have to go and get a foreign distributor in each country. Sometimes the distributor will handle a region, but generally they need a foreign distributor to handle that movie. They know the market, they handle the advertising, they have a relationship with the local theaters. So that distributor, that foreign distributor, is the one that's going, for instance, when you see a movie overseas, I'm sure many of you see a different logo in front of it being the one who distributed it. Sometimes it's an American studio. Like, for instance, you'll see maybe sometimes Paramount will have Warner Brothers International distribute their film overseas. But anyway, they don't do that for free. They want a part of that box office as well. So when you have foreign box office, you have the same situation where the theater needs some money, but then also that foreign distributor needs some of that money. And then when you have governments like China, they're taking some of that money as like a tax, right? So that's how at the end of the day, you've got that 50%, right? That's why with Ghostbusters, they said they need $300 million to break even, which is not including advertising, by the way, because Ghostbusters cost about $144 to make. So that's just break even on the budget, because, again, that 50%. So I hope that explains and gives you a little bit more of an idea of what the studios are dealing with in terms of profit sharing and why these numbers need to be so high at the box office for them to actually turn a profit. And don't forget, these are publicly traded companies that need to make money for their, not only the bigger companies that own them, but for the shareholders of said companies. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below today's top 3 stories and that viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching.